All right, we are live. Thank you,
Hello.
everyone. Yeah, hey, Taylor. Thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely.
Where are you dialing in from?
I am dialing in from Miami Lakes, Florida, just a few minutes outside of Miami.
Awesome. Nice and warm over there. For those that are just joining the call, if you can, just in the chat, drop in where you're dialing in from. This is going to be super exciting, super informative. We're going to primarily be discussing inventory, which is pretty much sitting cash.
Yes.
Before I do so, Taylor, do you mind? I know you have extensive experience in the retail world. Do you mind just sharing with everybody a quick background on yourself?
Yeah, totally. Well, again, my name is Taylor Daniel. I'm the Vice President of Merchandising at FOMO Agency. As Chad mentioned, my background is in retail planning and merchandise planning. So for the last 15 years, I've done a variety of roles in the retail industry, starting as a sales and visual merchandising associate back in the stores. And then I got my undergraduate degree in fashion merchandising. And since graduating from university, I have done merchandise planning and buying for brands like Johnston and Murphy, Old Navy, and Levi's. That was my most recent role. So mainly focusing on analyzing sales history and demand planning, forecasting, understanding trends that are going on in the industry as well as in our own sales data to make better informed decisions and help continue to grow the business in future selling seasons. So my brain is all about inventory all the time.
That's awesome. And what are you doing today at FOMO, just to give us some perspective there?
Yeah, so my background, as I mentioned, was doing retail planning for big giant companies, and today my primary focus is helping small to medium businesses really leverage those retail insights. Retail math is not something that a lot of people are exposed to until they're knee deep in business ownership. It's really important for these business owners to understand the math behind a successful retail business so that they can stay on top of their inventory, make sure that their data is accurate across all their channels, and really that they're making the most informed decisions that they possibly can.
Got it. Well, I love that you're saying math. We're about to get into some math, but before we
Yeah.
do, a word from our other sponsor, which is Skubana. Skubana is running these webinar series to drop value and share insights from across the ecosystem. I am a co-founder and CEO of Skubana. Skubana is an operational platform to run and automate your business. Check us out if you haven't heard of us. I run my own business with Skubana today, and hence why we're having a inventory conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
without further ado, let's talk about when you get into the weeds, like a company approaches you or FOMO, and they are like, hey, we need some help with our inventory. Where do you spend, how do you start in the engagement process? Just walk me through where you begin and where you
Yeah.
follow the data.
Yeah, so the first step in merchandise planning is a process called hindsighting. So basically, what that is taking a look at not only your sales history over a given time period, but also your inventory levels throughout that period and any other factors that might need to be considered. So when we're going through this hindsighting process, that's when all these KPIs really come into play. We are understanding what contribution of our total inventory was in each product category, or even down to the style and SKU level for many businesses. But on the flip side, we're also looking at our sales results, both retail sales and unit sales, to understand, proportionally, do we have the right amount of investment in this product? Is it balanced with our unit sales? Do we, there's lots of different levers that we can pull as merchants to improve the business. So that first step, hindsighting, is where we gain all of our insights. Then those insights translate into the next step, which is your class positioning. And
Before we get to class, I just want to focus on the hindsights for a second.
yeah,
So
sure.
the hindsights, are those rolled up on an annual basis? Is that a monthly basis? And is that rolled up into just a macro view of your inventory position, or is it rolled up on a SKU by SKU level? Just walk me through what that data looks
Yeah,
like.
totally. It does depend a little bit on the business. If it's a brand that happens to sell 10 SKUs, then they obviously would be doing it in a way that we call bottoms up planning, where you're looking at the performance of each individual SKU and then making assumptions to get your top level open to buy. Now, on the flip side, a company like Levi's, which has many thousands of SKUs every quarter, they might be doing more tops down planning, where they're looking at the categorical level first And then if they discover anomalies, they'll go a deeper level and a deeper layer to continue to uncover additional insights. You mentioned as far as like the time frame. For some businesses, they do this every month. For some, like H&M, they probably do it every 3 to 5 weeks. But for a brand like Levi's, they actually only have 2 selling seasons per year. So they have a spring season and a fall season, which both last for 6 months. So this hindsighting process happens all the time, but it's twice a year for companies that have 2 selling seasons or 2 replenishment seasons. And it can be, much more frequently for brands with higher turnover.
And so how about for those that are digitally native brands, they're doing well right now, they're getting a COVID bump. How would you use hindsighting currently for a modern day brand that's just direct to consumer?
Yeah. So another one of these, formulas that we use a lot in retail math is percent change. So we would want to take note of, the same time frame last year. What did we see? And, were there builds or declines in certain months, in certain categories? And then we would want to do the same exercise with what's going on in 2020. Obviously, we all know 2020 is a little bit of an anomaly. It's, for businesses all around the globe, inventory and sales figures are way different this year than they might have been more easily predicted and forecasted in the past. So for brands that want to, better prepare for this massive, rapid increase in online shopping, compared to brick and mortar shopping because of social distancing and everything, it's important to understand percent change. So when you look at what's happened this year compared to what happened last year, there's going to be a calculation. Oh, here we go. So build or percent change is the new figure minus the old figure divided by the old figure. So if we're looking at your retail sales, we want to look at the number of retail dollars you did this year minus the number of retail dollars you did last year, and then divide that by the number last year. That will give you the percent that you have changed in your retail sales from last year to this year. And
right, if the percent is so different because of COVID, right?
Yeah,
you're getting that COVID bump, then how do you bake that in? How do you properly make the right assumption?
Yeah.
Are we not making changes yet, or we're just hindsighting? So I'm not.
I mean, hindsighting and class positioning are, they are separate processes, but they're so interconnected. So some of those thought processes that technically live in the class positioning do start to happen during hindsighting. However, obviously the bump, the lift that some of these businesses, or the decline that some of these businesses have been seeing as a result of the pandemic, is going to be exacerbated because it's going to be the most dramatic right now because we're in the middle of it right now. We all understand that as things progress in the next, let's call it in the next 12 to 36 months, things are going to start to stabilize a little bit more. However, the thing that will remain, and many experts agree with this, is that online shopping will continue to take more contribution of total commerce in the US. For anyone who's not familiar, total commerce has been in the online space has accounted for between 5 to 10% in the last 15 years. And in this year, it has grown more than the last 8 years combined in online shopping specifically, because people aren't going out to the stores. They're just purchasing things online. So that's really important to consider as you're demand planning and forecasting for next year. I mean, November is now. So,
terrible.
Q1, I know we're talking about Q4 today, but Q1 is coming, and many retail brands, especially brands that only have 2 to 4 selling seasons, they've already placed orders for Q1, Q2. Some have even started planning for Q3 already for next year. So while you're doing all of that forecasting and that scenario playing and all of that stuff to try and understand what's the right balance of inventory between all your different categories, it is important to buffer that percentage. If you're looking at straight up this year versus last year, this year is going to be the hardest hit. Whether it was good or bad for you, this year is going to be the hardest hit because we're in the middle of it now. So I would say hedge your bets and probably buffer that down by about 25% for your Q4 if you can still take action for Q4.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it too late to plan for Q4?
That depends on your supply chain, right? I mean, if your suppliers are flexible and they have additional capacity to continue to meet your increased demand. Or even better yet, say that you have, this is a strategy that we used when I worked at Old Navy. We had an assortment of graphic t-shirts that we would just buy inventory that were blank, and they would just be like our top 5 colors. And anytime we needed to chase into something because it was like, oh, the rate of sale is really high on that t-shirt, let's get more. We already had all of these blank t-shirts ready to go. So the manufacturer was easily able to just screen and ship. And we got the inventory in a matter of weeks, where if we had started from scratch with no on-hand blanks, then that would have taken, 60, 90, maybe even 120 days. So that definitely makes a big difference.
So I appreciate that. So Taylor, we're on this journey with you. We're hindsighting. Anything else you want to share on hindsight before we move into the next path? Whatever, I know you mentioned the word, I forgot it already, but
class positioning, but we'll get there.
Class positioning. So let me know when you're ready to get there.
Yeah. So the last couple of things to note on hindsighting is that it's really important to, a lot of people have the ability to open a spreadsheet or a report and look at it. But the important thing is to understand the relationships between certain numbers. I've mentioned in a lot of my blog articles and social media posts that there's this idea of merchandising levers. And the 4 main merchandising levers, which we'll touch more on in a little bit, are price, product, place, and promotion. And every decision that you can make in merchandising affects one of those 4 things in some way. That can either stimulate or inhibit sales or slow down sales. There are reasons where someone might need to slow down sales. So it's really important to consider while you're hindsighting that you really dig deep under the covers to try and find out, okay, where are the anomalies? Where is something that is not typical? Where am I seeing something that I'm not used to seeing? Where is there a percent change that's dramatic in my rate of sale or my on-hand inventory? Or, if your unit sales have slowed down in a category that's typically bread and butter for you, but you also notice that your unit inventory was way down, that's probably why your unit sales were down, because you didn't give enough supply to satisfy your demand. So that's where your demand forecasting comes in. As I said, it's all very connected with, the whole process. It's a cycle of merchandising.
Yeah, and it's so connected to marketing too, right? Because if your marketing team is starting to push super heavy on a SKU, setting creatives into Instagram or to Facebook, or you're running lightning deals on Amazon, that could throw off percentages, especially if they start to bring that budget back down. So how do you actually manage that balance or that synergy between inventory planning and the marketing team?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And having a background in, big corporate enterprise retail brands, that was one of the biggest challenges, is that marketing, design, product development, and merchandising were separate departments. And so small businesses, especially, are at a little bit of an advantage, I would say, just because their teams are smaller. So it's very likely that their teammates are collaborating a lot more. And one of the things that I worked on a lot at Levi's, which was very refreshing, the marketing team was very open to us interacting with them as the merchandising team, where previous groups of team members may not have been quite as involved with marketing. And, we had very open lines of communication. That is one of the most important things. I would say try to remove the siloed culture of those 4 departments: product development, design, merchandising, and marketing. Those 4, if they work together, often magic is bound to happen, because you're using insights from different perspectives, different points of view, and they all have different goals, right? Design has different goals than merchandising, has different goals than product development, and marketing obviously is totally different than all of those. But the shared common goal is to improve the business, grow sales. So, if we're all looking through that lens and collaborating together, then that's definitely a strong approach to your seasonal planning.
I'm a big fan of cross-pollination.
Yes.
So I think it's super helpful.
Cross-functional relationships for the win.
Nice. So you mentioned 4P. Now I'm familiar with 3Ps from Marcus Lemonis. He always says people, process, and product.
Okay.
Now you're mentioning 4 new Ps. Can we break those down, and where is that in the process? Is that still hindsighting, or are we now moving into the class process?
This lives with you all year long. This is in and out. You live and breathe every day. If you are an inventory manager or a business owner who manages your own inventory, the 4 P's of merchandising should be what you live and breathe whenever you're working.
And what are the 4 P's again?
Product, price, place, and promotion. And I'll break those down a little bit. Product obviously is what you're selling. What products you're going to assort and how much of it you're going to invest in. The next one is price, obviously what ticket price you're going to list your products for and any additional discounts, promos, or markdowns that could be taken. And then place, what physical locations might carry it if you have brick and mortar stores. Where physically is the item placed in the store? Is it in the front window? Is it on a T stand right when you walk in the store? Is it sitting right by the cash wrap? Or for e-commerce stores, is it in your editorial banner right on the home page? Or is it only visible on your PDPs? Or where you place these products and how easily the customer can interact with that product plays a huge role on your unit sales velocity as well. And then the last one is promotion. Again, touching on the marketing, this is how you promote your products through social media marketing, advertising, website photography, and different things like that. So when you are evaluating your sales history, inventory levels, and various KPIs, we discover these insights, and those insights help us make merchandising decisions that improve the business and give it the best chance to flourish.
Okay, you know your stuff. Well, I'm so happy I brought you on. So we move from hindsighting, right, into this class positioning. What is that?
So class positioning is exactly what it sounds like. You have different classes of product. So let's say that you carry denim and blouses or woven tops and knit tops. Those three classes. So you would want to, after you've done your hindsight, you will have understood what percentage of your unit sales and your retail sales contributes from each of those 3 categories. And from there, you can balance your stock to sales by saying, okay, last year the woven tops accounted for 15% of our total unit sales, but it was only 10% of our total unit inventory for that time frame. So that there's an imbalance, that those 2 numbers are not as close to a 1-to-1 ratio as you might want them to be. So there's opportunity to invest more depth in that class of products because you know that your unit sales outpaced your inventory contribution. With me?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm loving it.
So that's one quick explanation of what class positioning is.
Just real quick, is class positioning, is that the same as the ABC inventory planning? Have you seen where you grade your SKUs with an A?
Like grow, maintain, decline, sort of. Yes, yeah. It's very similar. So during your hindsight process, you're probably going to have uncovered enough insights to at least cue to yourself certain categories or maybe even SKUs or styles that you definitely know you might want to consider walking away from completely, or at least reducing so that you can exit a product over time if you need a little more than 1 season to exit something. As I've mentioned a couple of times, all of this cycle is very connected and all of the pieces rely on each other. And even when you're done with hindsighting, you might go back while you're in the middle of class positioning, like, oh, I want to dig a little deeper into this one category because I'm seeing something else that maybe I can affect. And when you, as a merchandiser or inventory planner, can affect positive change, that's using retail math to the best of its ability.
Mm-hmm. And so is the class positioning, is this one of the levers that you're suggesting in the merchandising world, or is this the lever that you'd be leveraging? And then you'd be looking at percentage of unit contribution of order volume versus percentage of unit to inventory balance.
Right. So class positioning is, let's call it phase 2 of your planning cycle. Mm-hmm. And it kind of encompasses all 4 of the P's of merchandising, really. So you're deciding what product you want to buy. I guess the only part that's not part of class positioning is price and placement. So product and promotion both affect your inventory investments. If you know that last year you ran a promotion on your women's knit tops and it generated a 26% build in your unit sales compared to the prior year, that's information that's relevant to your class positioning going forward, because you need to understand what strategies your brand used to stimulate sales. And if those are not repeated, you need to factor that into your demand forecast. If they will be repeated, you also need to take note of that. And if they will be repeated, are we going to do it even better? Or is it going to be a similar, very, are we expecting the same results, or are we expecting that this promotion is going to be even better? For example, if last year you got this 26% build and it was just from an advertising campaign you did on Instagram, next year you're going to do an advertising campaign on Instagram with an influencer, you definitely might want to buffer your unit sales up higher in your demand forecasting while you're class positioning. Otherwise, you're going to run into stockouts. You're going to sell out of your inventory because you're accelerating your unit sales velocity by further promoting that product and increasing your exposure.
And what do you do after class positioning? Like, what is the next step that you would be taking us through?
Next step is open to buy. So once you have finished your class positioning and you kind of understand at the top level, bird's eye view, this is what I want each class to contribute to the total from an investment perspective. When we're talking about our
and just real quick, are you suggesting that everyone should develop classes? Like if I'm running a company called Think Crucial and I have vacuum filters, coffee filters, air filters, I should really class those things out.
I do think that it's helpful in the long run, even if you're a company that only sells 5 products right now. If you have aspirations to grow your assortment in the future, it will help you. It will only help you if you begin to categorize and attribute things now, because then that structure will be built into your operations as you continue to grow and you continue to expand and you continue to invest in new product categories. The more meticulous and detail-oriented you are attributing these styles to certain classes or departments or whatever you want to call them, then the more calculated you can be while you're going through your class positioning, your hindsighting, your open to buy, all that good stuff. And it's just all of that translates to more strategic buys, less wasted inventory investments, less stockouts. Like it only will help you.
Okay, good. That's great for building a foundation. That's something that, I have like 1,800 SKUs and we haven't in Skubana, we've labeled them and categorized them, but we haven't like broken them out on a class basis to understand contribution per class. I think that's a really fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important parts, especially for a brand that is selling, thousands of SKUs. You need to be able to look at the, that bird's eye view to understand what's happening at the macro level before any of the micro level stuff will even make sense or matter. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we talked about the next step. So open to buy planning. So basically open to buy planning, which I think Gina might have the formula for that one as well. When you are planning your forecast for a future season, you need to understand how much you have on hand now, how much you expect to sell between now and the season that we're talking about, whether that's, 2 seasons from now or 4 seasons from now, it doesn't really matter. So you need to understand everything that's on order, everything you have on hand now, and everything you expect to sell between now and then. And that will help you arrive at a figure that will, okay, here we have. So planned beginning inventory. So what you want to start that future selling season with. Then you would subtract your on-hand inventory plus any upcoming receipts, and then subtract your planned unit sales.
When you say upcoming receipts, is that something that you've already paid down and you have on the water?
Yes, these are orders you've already submitted. These are things that you've already committed to. They may be items that you can exit depending on your relationship with your suppliers. But yes, you'd want to take note of any upcoming receipts that are already on order that you're already expecting between now and the moment that the season that you're planning for in the future. So while you're going through this open to buy process, it's really helpful to have already gone through hindsight and class positioning, because now once you've gotten this open to buy number, that's just a number. So you can take your class positioning, which is percent values, and apply that to your total open to buy. That will help you get to, okay, for women's knit tops, I'm going to do 26% of my total open to buy is going to be women's knit tops. Then from within that number, then you can start to break it down by style or color or whatever other attributes are important to your business.
So Taylor, correct me if I'm wrong. So open to buy essentially is a future budget pretty much that now we're allocating a percentage based on the classwork that we did previously.
Exactly.
Okay.
And yeah, that can be expressed as far as open to buy. It can be expressed in dollars or in units. I tend to prefer to stick to units in at least in my work history. I have preferred that. But there are some planners out there who prefer to look at things from a retail dollar perspective than a unit perspective, simply because there are cases where, you know, a product might have a lower gross margin, but maybe it actually generates more unit revenue or more unit sales. So your margin production from that product is higher, even though you're selling maybe more or less units of other things. So it can be helpful to look at it from both perspectives, but I definitely prefer to do my open to buy planning on a unit basis.
Okay. So we do this budget analysis, we allocate percentages based on the class work that we've done,
Yes.
and then you execute on that.
Yeah. So once you have applied your percent contributions that you want, that we came out of our class positioning with, to your open to buy figure, that's when the fun part starts. Then you get to understand, really dissect, okay, I have, let's call it 10,000 units that I'm going to allocate to women's knit tops. And then you're choosing, so once you've gotten your top level number, you want to maybe go with some of your bottoms up planning. So this is where, looking at it from both ends of the spectrum can be helpful. So once you've done your class positioning and you're on your unit buy planning and you're choosing which SKUs you want to put in your assortment, you will want to look at the SKU level at what happened in previous seasons. So say that you had this one top that was your number one selling top, and you offered it in 5 different colors, and the white, black, and the blue were your top 3 selling, and the red and orange were your bottom sellers. That gives you a clue. Do I want to just buy more of those 3 that sold really well, or do I want to continue with the other colors because I feel that my assortment needs it for some aesthetic reason? There are times when you might intentionally buy something and just buy it smaller because you know that it will visually improve the presentation of your assortment, because you don't want things to be just all solid colors or all the same, or you don't want too much duplication in your assortment. Otherwise, there's this like decision paralysis that customers go into when there's not enough variety and it looks boring and things like that. So anyway, so this bottoms up level planning can be really helpful when you're trying to understand, okay, now that I'm looking at the SKU level, how much do I want of each specific SKU? So, like the red and orange example, maybe I'll only buy 1,000 units of each of those, and maybe the next season I'll exit it completely. And then the other 3 colors, the blue, white, and black, I'm going to use almost my entire open to buy budget for that class on those 3 styles or those 3 colors, because I know they'll generate the most revenue.
Okay. And so I haven't heard you talk about other metrics. I guess in your specific jobs, there's probably 3 metrics that you're held to as a planner. What are those metrics? Like after you've done this analysis, like what are the KPIs that companies are holding you to in the business as it relates to inventory?
Yeah. So in regards to inventory specifically, productivity is a huge metric that I was always evaluated on.
Productivity of the SKU.
Of the style, yes.
The style.
So as a company, how much money did we invest to offer this product, and how much money did we make? It basically was a way for us to benchmark, okay, this is the amount of effort that went into procuring this product, the cost of the materials, the freight, all, the marketing, everything, and then how much revenue did we generate from that? So it's kind of like an ROI, but in retail, retail terms.
I would say it's like it's return on inventory.
Yeah,
investment, ROII.
Yeah.
And so what is a good ratio?
Well, that is
this new formula we've created.
It's very dependent on the business. So when I worked at Levi's, we often express this figure in just dollars, like how much revenue did we generate from this specific SKU. When I was at Old Navy, it was more unit productivity. So from this particular SKU or style or class or whatever we were looking at, we would then understand, in that given style, were there, were there 5 different colors that we offered? What was the SKU productivity of each of those? What was the style productivity of that parent style? So that we could make decisions not only about, is this a class or a style we want to continue carrying, but do we need to change the level of investment in the future? So that was definitely a big one. Obviously, percent change, which I touched on at the beginning, in our retail and unit sales, that was definitely a big one, but that's obviously more sales metrics rather than inventory metrics.
Can I throw a number out there? I would probably want, as a business owner, I would probably want a 5x ROII. So on whatever we've invested on that SKU, I'd want a 5x return on that SKU from planning and merchandising. What do you think? What are your thoughts there? Is that too high, too low? I mean, that's just what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the price point of the product in this particular conversation. For products that are really high ticket items, like think about the automobile industry, your ROI might not be 5, it might be like 1 or 2, but if you're selling enough, then that will balance out and provide you with the margins and the the profits that you're looking for. Right. Conversely, for a brand like H&M, where their price points are really low, they definitely want to be able to sell as many units of that style as they can, because not only are they getting discounts from the manufacturers and the vendors for producing so many units, but also the faster that they can turn their inventory, the faster that they can get new inventory. And brands like that, obviously, they want to have really high ROII. We just coined that term. So,
or I think a different way to look at it could be the cost of the sale, right? In advertising terms, it would be like, we are spending 20 cents to make $1, so the average cost of sale is 20%. Right. So putting a percentage out there as it relates to the overall sale price, I think could be another good way to look at it.
Yeah, totally. That's definitely another figure that has come up in in these conversations for sure. So you asked me.
We haven't talked about. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, we haven't talked about aging or like inventory turns. That hasn't come up yet on the journey. When do we get to those formulas and metrics?
Yeah, so we can talk about them now. So a couple of other metrics that were very important for me in my planning Gesundheit were stock to sales ratio, which we've touched on a little bit, the ratio between your unit sales and your unit inventory of any given style or class of products, as well as your rate of sale, which is how many units per week or per month, depending on the organization, you're selling over a given period of time. And then weeks of supply, which is another great one. How many weeks of inventory do you have on hand to sustain the current rate of sale? And then last but not least, being the inventory turnover rate. So the inventory turnover, being a measure of how many times your inventory is purchased, is sold and then replenished in a given year. Oh, perfect. So we have the formula for this is the cost of goods sold divided by the average inventory value. This is definitely a big one in the world of merchandise planning, because we want to make sure that this number is at a healthy rate. You don't want it to be too high, because if you're replenishing really often, that means that you're also selling too much of your inventory and potentially running into missed sales because you're selling out of products. Where on the flip side, if your inventory turnover rate is too low, then you might be sitting on products that are stagnant or there's no demand for them. So it might be a category that you may consider walking away from or declining in the future. So when it comes to your inventory turnover rate, the important things to keep in mind is that if you, I've mentioned that all of these things are very connected, and the same goes with the metrics that I've just mentioned. There's a lot of correlation and relationship between all of these metrics. So if you, let's say that you notice that a style with a lower ticket price than some other similar styles has a much more favorable rate of sale than your other products. You could have a price lever to pull here. Depending on your margins, of course, maybe you consider lowering prices on some of the other items to increase the rate of sale. If that's successful, you would also be increasing the inventory turnover rate. So other considerations must be made. Can your supplier keep up with those increased production needs? Are there shorter lead times available? There's other things to consider because these are also connected with each other. So as I've mentioned, all of these things are considered throughout each phase of the planning process, from hindsighting all the way until you actually place a PO and send that off to your manufacturer.
So specifically on inventory turns, is there any, maybe it's by category or maybe it's by what sector you're in the digitally native e-commerce world, but is there a number that you think is healthy that should be achieved for inventory turns?
Yeah, totally. So it definitely is industry specific. But I would say for anyone who's in the fashion industry, beauty industry, or home decor, those are industries where they can benefit from being in a range, I would say between 4 and let's call it 8 times per year. So maybe you're replenishing once a quarter or once every like month and a half or so. So that level of replenishment or restocking or adding new product on your sales floor not only stimulates sales because your loyal customers want to see new goods on the floor every time that they come in or on the website every time that they visit. But also it helps you make sure that you're buffering your demand forecasting with your replenishment cycles so that you have enough overlap that you can continue to meet sales demand during those last few weeks of your sales cycle before replenishment comes. Because if your service levels drop too low, then you also have missed sales because maybe you ran out of size mediums or something like that can also hinder your sales performance.
Okay, and so you mentioned stock to sales ratio.
Yes.
You mentioned that on a SKU level, and I'm wondering if you would look at this not on a SKU level, but on a company level. Like if you're a $7 million company, what should your inventory value be on a $7 million company? Like,
yeah, that's interesting. So I think it makes sense to segment your products into basic products that you carry year round. These ones are ones that you can rebuy any time of year. They'll continue to sell.
Mm-hmm.
The rate of sale is pretty consistent on this, no matter the promotion, stuff like that. Then there's seasonal products or trendy products, or maybe it's a Valentine's Day graphic tee or something like that the unit buy is going to be a lot shorter. So a lot smaller. When you're dealing with seasonal products like that, I think it's really important to target a 100% sell-through rate. If it is a product that you're not going to replenish and it's just a one, buy it and let it sell through and then be done with it until next year if you want to do a similar product. This is also great for holidays, for Black Friday, like doorbuster deals. These are products that you don't carry all the time. You only have them for a short window of opportunity, but you want to make sure that buy is tight, but large enough to satisfy the demand that might be generated from any promotion or marketing materials associated with that product. So on basic products, though, I think it's really important to target somewhere between a 60 and 75% sell-through rate. So while you're going through your class positioning and your open to buy planning and your demand forecasting, all of that obviously we've touched on is very interconnected processing. And when you are forecasting your unit sales for basic products, you want to make sure, like I just touched on, that you have enough, your service levels are strong enough that you can continue to satisfy your consumer demand until the replenishment comes. So it's difficult to give you a figure as far as, what number companies should be targeting if they're, a $7 million company. But I would say when you're doing demand forecasting and looking at your unit sales the previous year or, whatever category you're working on, it's important to understand, is this product basic? Am I rebuying this? Or is this just a one and done? Or even, maybe you'll buy it for 2 cycles and then stop. If it's like swimwear, you'll buy that through most of Q1 and Q2 and maybe the beginning of Q2, but then you'll stop replenishing as you get towards June and July before back to school. So it really just depends on the category of merchandise. For beauty and home decor, there's a little bit more flexibility there. Obviously, fashion is much more trend oriented. There's a lot more short-term trends in fashion. But in home decor and in the beauty industry, these products, it's more applications of the products that are trendy rather than the products themselves. So those buying cycles might be longer. The inventory turnover rates might be a little lower because they're more basic products that can kind of sell all year round.
So I, like Tyler, who just dropped into the chat here from Austin, one of my favorite cities in the United States, is
Yeah.
loving this conversation. Have you ever been to Austin, by the way?
Yeah. I'm from
Oh,
Texas.
you're from Texas.
Yeah, I went to Texas State University. Shout out to my alma mater in San Marcos, just about 15 minutes south of Austin.
Got it. I love Austin, Texas, and I miss it. I can't wait to go back. So I've been loving this conversation, and I definitely want to be respectful of your time, and certainly everyone who's dialed in today. So we're going to move into the lightning round
Sure.
questions. If anybody does have other questions they want to post I didn't ask in the chat, if you can drop those questions in now, make them great, because other people are going to want to hear from you. But why don't we start with this? What are the biggest mistakes you're seeing right now companies making in this inventory planning season?
Yeah. So when it comes to mistakes that I see, small and large businesses making, especially in the small businesses, I'll start with this one. So small business owners tend to be creators. They're people who, they have a passion for something that they make, and they've turned it into an amazing business, and it's awesome. They're expanding their assortment. That's great. However, I find that there is often this roadblock with small business owners where they grow personally attached to some of the products that were maybe their brainchild, and maybe then they ignore KPIs that should be signaling, okay, maybe I need to exit this style, maybe I need to exit this color, maybe I need to try something new, where small business owners will feel a sentimentality towards their product, which totally.
I'm in that same boat, by the way. I hold on to inventory, I get emotional to it, I don't want to let it go, and then finally I get pushed and we have to deplete it or liquidate it.
Yeah. And that's not what you want, right? You don't want to be holding on to inventory that's forcing you to mark down. You want to be able to sell in an ideal world, right? Every single item that you sell would be sold at reg price. There would be no markdowns taken. There would be no discounts. That would be amazing. But unfortunately, that's just not the way the world works. And if you're holding on to inventory that there's no demand for, whether it's because of seasonality or it's a trend that has passed or what have you, that will hurt your business, because not only are you going to incur holding costs from holding on to that inventory at your DC or even in your brick and mortar stores if you're a physical store, you're also going to be missing sales because your open to buy will be lower because you have all this extra on-hand inventory that you don't actually need.
So you're saying they don't have the cash, right? So your first suggestion for small, medium-sized businesses right now is to let go of any emotional burden you have or attachment to your inventory and get rid of it. Either get the cash back so you can use it to roll forward into new products or into good sellers.
Exactly. And a great way to do that without taking a permanent markdown is to try and run, short-term promotions. I love doing, like a buy more, save more type of promo, or like get 20% off your whole purchase if you buy 3 items or more, like things that generate a strong UPT or units per transaction. Those are great promotions, especially if the percentage that you're offering is enticing to a customer, like 5%, 10%. Most customers are like, that's just a few bucks. But if it's anything greater than 15%, I would say the consumer, especially that, value-driven consumer, is going to be encouraged and like feel compelled to make a purchase because they're like, oh, well, I like this thing. I have to buy it now because I can get 20% off. So that's a great way to try and move through some inventory.
I'm going to drop a suggestion on my side that I've seen work for us is essentially kitting and bundling. So taking a high velocity item with a low velocity item, pair it together in like a kit, and you can get a higher order value, which means more profit dollars, absolute dollars at the end of the day, and you're moving that inventory out.
Yep, definitely. That's a great strategy as well. So another mistake that I see merchants make when it comes to inventory management is trying to get into a trend that may not be right for their brand. Just because a trend pops up and there might be a short window of opportunity, if your lead times and your brand image don't both support that, then it's not the right decision. And I do see business owners investing, their very precious dollars in inventory that's maybe not brand right. Or
give me an example. Can you drop an example without hurting people's feelings?
So when I worked at Old Navy, Old Navy is part of Gap Inc., which is Gap, Banana Republic, and Old Navy. And I was part of the international buying team. So all of my stores were in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Saudi Arabia, really cool stuff. When we collaborated a lot with the other brands, so Banana Republic and Gap, all three brands had stores in the same places. So we were doing trend research and things like that with the same geographic region. And so it helped to be able to collaborate across brands. However, there was a trend that, Banana Republic noted, the Banana Republic team noticed, it's like a linen, like smock type menswear shirt. And that made total sense for Banana Republic because it's a business casual type of product, but that doesn't really make sense for Old Navy, right? Or Gap even. So this like long sleeve linen, high quality material makes total sense for Gap, or for Banana Republic, but it's not quite brand right for Old Navy, which is a value driven brand. So that's a small example. But another example might be, if you are a brand that sells, skincare, moisturizers and things like that, maybe you see a trend with, all of these beauty influencers out there doing, like a full face while they're on camera and, promoting these different products. And if you start trying to add on things like apparel into your assortment that maybe women can wear while they're doing their regimens or whatever, that it could work, but it might require a lot more effort to promote that whole new class of products. That's when your customers, your target customers, your loyal customers are coming to you for something else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I was. I guess the recent example for me was Allbirds. So Allbirds launched so they have sustainable footwear, and it's logical to maybe add socks to the mix.
Sure.
But I would have continued to build out the footwear brand. They started moving into sustainable apparel, especially given COVID right now. It's not in my opinion, it wasn't the right wedge, or it wasn't the right entry point into apparel. I think they should have probably expanded their assortment. There was so much more footwear to be making, and they decided to move to apparel. So I think that's just one example that always comes to mind for myself.
Yeah, totally.
So. All right, next lightning question, and this is going to be the last one, unless there's others that come up. What should I have asked you that I haven't asked you?
Well,
I know we covered a lot.
Yeah, we have covered a lot. So something that I think someone asked through HubSpot that actually got me thinking. Someone asked what apps, programs, or habits are best to stay on top of inventory. So a couple of things to keep in mind as you are, trying to implement best practices, especially for those small or pre-launch types of businesses. It's important, as we touched on, to implement structure now so that as you continue to grow, your operations can support your new practices. So a few things to keep in mind for businesses that sell from the same inventory across multiple channels. It is critical to ensure that your POS and your inventory systems are integrated so that they can communicate with each other. Otherwise, you're going to have to record all this stuff manually, which obviously is time consuming and very error prone because of, the human element. So for example, if you sell an item on Amazon, you need to make sure that your inventory levels are updated across any other sales channels like your website, other marketplaces or whatever, so that you can avoid overselling. Because the worst thing you want is you have gained a new customer and then you have to send an email saying, hey, sorry, actually, I don't have that item. You're going to have to wait until I have more.
Taylor, you're selling Skubana for us right now. You don't have to do that.
Well, it's important. I mean, I know that Skubana is an amazing solution. I don't know if our listeners have been able to see a walkthrough or a demo of the solution, but as a merchandiser, having worked for giant corporations, like Levi's is a global name, like household name. This company, Gap, like they didn't have any solutions for me to do any of my reporting, any of my purchasing, any of my buy planning, none of that. And I'm sitting, granted, I'm trained in how to do these things. So there's many hundreds of thousands of merchandisers at lots of big retail companies around the world. But I sit here and think, if I had a solution that could automate the reporting and the accuracy and all that part, and then I could use my analytical brain to dig deeper instead of literally 90, it is crazy. 90% of half the year we are working in Excel. Like, we are just building reports, we are sorting data, we are, trying to build graphs and things that we can present to leadership and stuff like that. And it is very, very time consuming. And it's kind of mind blowing to me that more giant retail companies don't have those types of solutions in place for their merchandising and design teams and production teams to utilize in conjunction with each other. So that's definitely very important. Did you have anything to add on that before I go to my next tip?
No, I mean, that was great. Doesn't require anything.
I promise I'm going to stick to my material over here. So tip number 2, I would say during the holiday season, during your peak season, it's important to review business every day. Even if it's just 10 minutes at the start of your day, take a look at your top KPIs, inventory contributions, your stock to sales ratios, your weeks of supply, and your rate of sale. Those are 2 of the earliest indicators that you might actually need to chase into more inventory of a hot selling style. So say that you have some style that you launched in August for back to school, and it didn't really do as much as you thought, but then you're checking your reports every day, the first few minutes of your workday, and it's Q4, and you notice, oh my gosh, this shirt now has 10 times the rate of sale that it did a few months ago. We might need to get more inventory. That's one of your merchandising levers that you can pull. Hopefully you have the infrastructure in place to be able to negotiate with your suppliers to get you product with shorter lead times. That's another thing. Negotiate with your suppliers. Especially if you're a small business, it can be intimidating. I've been there myself. It can be very intimidating, especially if there's a language barrier. I know it's tough. But especially as your relationship with these manufacturers or suppliers continues to grow, ask for things. The worst that they'll say is no. But if you say, hey, I would really like to be able to offer, more products that you guys make for me, and I need shorter lead times. Like, can we get to 6 weeks?
I didn't know lead time was negotiable. I always thought just price was negotiable.
It definitely can be. It definitely can be, depending on the supplier or manufacturer's current capacity, right? If they have several different clients and they're producing lots of inventory for all of them, they may not have additional capacity. But especially if you know that already and that they can take on more, definitely ask. I mean, the worst that they could say is no, right? And maybe they even have some ideas of how to shorten your lead times. Maybe we buy bulk fabric up front, like we were talking about with the Old Navy blank t-shirts earlier. Maybe we, go ahead and cut and sew blank whatever, and then we can dip dye them and ship them out, or we can screen print them and ship them out, or we can, whatever. If you have some of the materials or even partially finished goods on hand, that can help shorten your lead times and improve your relationships with your manufacturers. So then another tip, unless you have anything else on that one.
No, please keep dropping value.
So as we've touched on, it is important to note that Q4 2020 is going to be pretty different than Q4 in years past. So I think that it's important to make sure that the bulk of your inventory is accessible at your DCs and warehouses, rather than in your brick and mortar stores or any, in-person expression that you might have, so that you can satisfy the increased demand from online shoppers. We mentioned earlier that the growth of online sales has increased more in the last 5 months than it has in the last 7-8 years. That is significant growth. And so for you as a merchant to be able to strategically place your inventory in the position that's going to allow you to satisfy that huge shift into online shopping, that's definitely going to be critical. And then for doorbusters, for holiday doorbusters, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think it's very important to make sure that those buys are conservative. The last thing that you want is to be left sitting on inventory that can't sell without being marked down, or can't sell at all, depending on the seasonality of it. And then the last tip that I wanted to share is I think that it's very important to perform a physical inventory count in the early days of November, or even the end of October, so that you know that all your systems, your inventory is correct and accurate across all your channels, all your warehouses. And then you'll want to perform another inventory count either in January or February, so that you can account for any shrink you may have encountered during the holiday season. But those tips right there, those will all help you stay on top of things throughout the season. It will help you catch changes that are happening in your business, and it will help you react in a smart way that can help you take advantage of every opportunity that bubbles up.
Well, there you have it, everybody. Taylor Daniel, thank you so much for coming on. What is the best way that people can find you and learn more about what you do, where you hang out?
Yeah, well, I'm everywhere, but you can always visit us at FOMOagency.com. But of course, you're welcome to follow me on Instagram at Taylor Jessie, or on Twitter at Taylor_J Daniel. I know that one's a mouthful, but we can share them after the fact. But yeah, I'm bouncing around all the time, but FOMOagency.com is always a great way to reach me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. Super grateful for dropping the value, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, sounds great. Have a good week, guys.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.